Oh, Baruch Hashem. Today is Yom HaMiyuchas. Today is the special day. So today's Daf Yomi is the Shevuos Daf Chaf class. And so we're going to start on the bottom of Chaf Zayin Amud Beis, 6 lines from the bottom. Today's Daf is dedicated for a Shemir for the Chayalim. That's all for the Shuyim and Yeshua for Am Yisrael. Says the Gemara, the Rava has a chiddush. Amar Rava nishbal kikar. You take an oath that you're not going to eat from this bread, va'achla, and then you ate from the bread. Imshir mimena kazayis. So let's say there's at least a loaf, and there's at least an olive-sized amount left from this loaf of bread. Then nisha aleha. Then he can go to the chacham and ask about this oath and have it annulled, as long as there's an olive-sized amount left from the loaf of bread, and then he wouldn't be liable to bring the korban or the lashes. So, achla kula, but let's say he ate the entire loaf of bread, ein nishala. Then it's too late for him to ask about it, because then it's already been consumed, and at that point, once he eats all of it, then it's too late. It's too late at that point. The Kilos Yaakov explains that it's no longer in existence, and so therefore it's as though the oath is not there anymore, and so therefore the chacham cannot nullify it. What's the scenario? If he said, I'm not going to eat anything, then from the moment he's eaten the first olive size amount, he's done the prohibition. And so therefore he should be liable. He should be liable once he's done it. What does it help to ask to the chacham to exempt him when he's already done the prohibition? And if he said, if he said, I'm not going to eat the entire thing, my area kazayas, why do we require there to be at least an olive size amount left? I feel kol shehunami, even if there's any amount, it should also be sufficient for him to go to the chacham and ask. So the Gemara says, if you want, we're on the top of Chav Chesem and Aleph. If you want, we could say Shlo Ochal. If you want, we could say the scenario where he said he's not going to eat any of it. Or else we could say the scenarios where he said he's not going to eat the whole thing. If you want, you could say the scenario is where he said he's not going to eat any of it. Why? We could say that in a scenario where he said he's not going to eat any of it, he could still go to the chacham and ask. Why? Since the idea that he could still annul part of the oath is in existence, because he said, I'm not going to eat any of this loaf. And so therefore, if he would eat the last loaf, the last part of the loaf, he would still be liable. And so therefore, since that's the case, the chacham can annul the last part. And in order to annul the last part, he's annulling the whole oath. When he goes back and annuls the whole oath, therefore, he's going to annul the first part also. That's how Rashi explains it. That's the explanation of Rashi. Boker Tov, Jeff, we're on the top of 28a. So then the Gemara says, or alternatively, Shalo Ochlena. Or alternatively, we could say the scenarios where he said, I'm not going to eat the entire thing. Then Ishayer Kazayas, then he can only annul it. He can only go to the Chacham to annul it. There's an olive-sized amount left. Why? Because if there's an olive-sized amount left, Chashev Lichulio, it's considered significant enough to ask the Chacham about it. Vilo, but if there's not an olive-sized amount, Lo Chashev Lichulio, and it wouldn't be significant enough to ask about it. So again, Rava's Chiddush, we're 8 lines from the top on 28a. Rava's Chiddush is that as long as the prohibition is done and the prohibition is no longer in existence, you can no longer go to the Chacham to ask about it. Our challenges is from the case of a Nazir. A Stam Nazirus, we learned in Tractate Nazir is 30 days. The person says, I'm going to be a Nazir, and then I'm going to be a second time a Nazir. So the case is Meisve Misha Nazir Shtei Nazirus, a person who said he's going to be a Nazir, 2 periods of Nazirus back to back. Umana Rishona, and he counted the first one. He did the first 30 days of Nazirus. V'hifra Shalei Karban, and he separated a sacrifice to bring at the end of his Nazirus. V'achakach Nishal Rishona, and then he goes to the Chacham and he says, can you annul my first Nazirus? Also, Shnia Barishona. So then the second Nazirus now takes the place of the first one. And he had counted 30 days. So Rashi explains, meaning even after he finishes the 30 days, there's nothing left there. He could still go to the Chacham and annul it. So that's a refutation of Rava's principle. So the Gemara says, no, Chacham Ayaskinan, it's still there, because as long as he has not brought the sacrifice, it's not complete. Chacham Ayaskinan b'shelo kiper, he hasn't brought the sacrifice. So we'll stop right there. The Rishonim asked, the Rimagash asked, what are you talking about? Our scenario here of the oath, he hasn't brought the sacrifice. That's what we're talking about. He hasn't brought the sacrifice. That's why he could still annul it. I mean, that's the whole issue here. So our case also. So they have to explain that there's a fundamental difference between the sacrifice by an oath and the sacrifice by a Nazir. The sacrifice by an oath is a punishment, so it's not part and parcel of the ritual, but the sacrifice of the Nazir is part of the Nazirus. So that's what you have to explain that way. Mar says, Vatanya keeper, but the Brisa says he's already brought the korban and he can still go and achieve atonement. Mar says, okay, b'shelo gileach. No, he can annul the Nazirus because he has not yet taken the haircut. For Rabbi Eliezer, and it follows Rabbi Eliezer's position, the Amar tiglachas ma'akva. As long as the Nazir hasn't taken hasn't shaved his hair, he's still considered to be a Nazir. So therefore, that's why he can annul it. So the Gemara says, Vatanya Gileach. Well, even Bryce said specifically that he was Gileach. So Amar Ravashi, the Rashi says a different answer. Nazirus Karamis. You're asking me a kasha from Nazirus? Mi garam l'shniya shalotichol rishona ve'ena. He says, no. He says, you're asking me a question from Nazirus? Don't ask me from a question from the fact that he's a Nazir on Shevuos. Because there's a fundamental difference. And the fundamental difference is, what's the reason why the second one wasn't counted yet? Just that the first one was there. And so therefore, now that the first one is no longer in existence, it's clear that the initial days that he counted was counted for the second one. Meaning to say the second one was just in abeyance. It's as though the first one was never in existence, and so therefore he can know about it. But the second one was always hovering. But by the oath that he took by the loaf of bread, he took an oath not to eat it, and then he ate it, we have to say that it's no longer in existence anymore. And so therefore he can't ask about it. It's not completely clean, but that's the way the commentaries explain it. That the second Nazirus is really part and parcel of the first Nazirus. So it's in existence the whole time, really. Where it's just being held in abeyance, whereas the oath, if the loaf of bread is no longer there, it's done. So fine, that's the way I understand it. So then Amaimer gives a different answer. Amaimer argues with Rava. He's not answering the questions on Rava. He's arguing with Rava. Rava said, once you eat the whole loaf of bread, you can no longer take an oath on it. Amaimer says, no. He says, once you eat the entire loaf of bread, even after you eat it, you could go to the Chacham and annul the oath. Why? Because, like we had said before about the Nazir, you're missing the korban, and so therefore you're not completed. And even amazing if you did intentionally, mechusar malchus, you're missing the lashes. So the action of the oath is still in existence. Avokaftuhu, amod. Well, once you tied him up and give him the lashes, then he can no longer ask about it. Kiddush Shmuel. Gemara says, like Shmuel taught, Kaftua Amud, Viratz Bezdin. So the Gemara asked the question, Kaftua Amud low, but if he had tied him up on the pillar, then you can no longer annul it. But so the Gemara says, yeah, it's like Shmuel who says Kaftua Amud, Viratz Bezdin Pater. that once you tied him up, even if you ran away, he's exempt from lashes. So it's too late once you tie him up. So the Gemara says, no, once he runs, as we said in Malchus, he had the embarrassment of the Malchus. But in this case, he hasn't had but if he hasn't had the embarrassment, then he's still susceptible to the lashes. And so therefore, you can annul the oath. So that's the fundamental difference between Rava and Amemar, whether or not you can annul an oath up until the time that the lashes were not given yet. Amar Rava, so now Rava tells us something else. Okay, so now this is a conditional oath. A person says, he said, we have two loaves of bread in front of him, loaf A and loaf B. He says, I'm not going to eat loaf A if I will eat from loaf B. I won't eat loaf A if I'll eat from loaf B. So hold on, I gotta stop this. He says, I won't eat loaf A if I eat from loaf B. So loaf A is the one he's not allowed to eat, but it's predicated on the condition of eating loaf B. And then he ate the first one, i.e., he ate the one that was the conditional oath, meaning to say, actually, what we called B. So we'll make it easier. We'll allow it to Gemara. He says, I won't eat loaf B if I eat loaf A. If I eat loaf A, that's the conditional, then I won't end up eating, then I won't be allowed to an oath that I won't eat loaf B. And then when he ate loaf A, the conditional one, he forgot about the oath. He forgot about the oath. And then the second one, when he eats the second one, he eats intentionally. He says, I know I took an oath and I can't eat it. Potter is exempt. Why? Because the oath takes effect at the moment you do the action to validate the oath. And we had said that there you need to have knowledge that this is an oath. And so since he doesn't have knowledge at that moment, he's exempt. And so therefore the oath never takes effect. And so therefore, even though he eats it intentionally, the loaf B, it doesn't matter, he's exempt. But let's say he does the Rishon of Amazed. He eats the first one intentionally. He knows it's an oath. And now he knows he can't eat the oath number two, the loaf number two, Vishnia B'Shogeg. And then he forgets about it and eats loaf B, the one that's prohibited. Chayav, he's liable for a korban, because that's the definition of korban ol v'yored on a Shevuos bito. He didn't keep his oath. Let's say he ate shteim b'shogeg. Let's say he ate both accidentally. Potter, he's exempt, because it's the same concept. When he did the first conditional one, he didn't know, so therefore he's exempt for it. Shteim b'mezid. So let's say he did the first one, both of them intentionally, meaning to say he knew it was an oath when he ate loaf A, and then he went ahead and sinned and he ate loaf B. So how do we do it? So the Gemara first, actually breaks it up. It depends with the order. If he ate the conditional one first, loaf A first, and then loaf B, which is how I just explained it, mechayev, because then he's liable. He has to get lashes because he violated Shevuos bitoy intentionally, so he gets lashes. But let's say he ate loaf B, and then he ate loaf A. So he ate loaf B, but he was only going to be liable if he was going to then eat loaf A. You had a question, Jeff?
Why is he liable? He's the conditional loaf deliberately, and yes, he has to that's what he owns. And eats the second loaf. Because that is shogeg, and that he's going to get korban ol v'yored. He has to bring a korban. That's a shogeg. It gets lashes. But let's say he first ate loaf B, the one that's prohibited, and then he ate the conditional loaf A. Well, that's the pukta de Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish. That's a dispute that we've had many times already. We had it in Makos 16. We had it earlier in 3b in our tractate. And the question is, do we say Asra Safek Shema Asra? Umanda Amar Asra Safek Shema Asra Chai. Umanda Amar Lav Shema. Umanda Amar Lav, according to the one that says Asra Safek Shema Asra Chai. Umanda Lav Shema Asra is Pater. I mean to say, do we say a warning which you're which is a doubt, it's considered a warning because you don't know when he's eating the one that is actually prohibited, whether or not he's going to eat the conditional. So that's a dispute between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. So now the Gemara makes the question a little bit more complex. Talan Zu, yeah, sure.
In case when he eats the prohibited rule first,
Yeah.
that means it's not prohibited.
Yeah, but it will be prohibited if he eats the other one. That's why it says a hatzar suffix.
So if the second loaf, if the second bread is not there anymore, then when you eat the conditional bread, there's nothing for the condition to attach to at that point.
The concept is this loaf of bread you're not allowed to eat if you eat that loaf of bread today, if you eat the other one today. So that prohibition, when he eats the second loaf, it demonstrates that the first loaf was prohibited. So that's the way it is. I understand your question. Yeah. So they're saying, so maybe that's why they're teaching it here to say this is not the same case as what Rava was saying before. That's what they're saying. This is not the same case. So now we say Toan Zubazu. Let's say you say, if I eat A, then I can't eat B. And if I eat B, then I can't eat A. So you made them both conditional on each other. So Toan Zubazu. Then, so if he made them both together, meaning to say, Lo ochal zu im ochal zu, and lo ochal zu im ochal zu. Then if he eats one, he can't eat the other. Let's say, V'achal zo bezadon atzma ubeshiglas chaverta, v'zo bezadon atzma ubeshiglas chaverta. So, and so what does he do? He eats loaf A, knowing that it's prohibited if he ate. So basically, he remembers when he eats the first loaf that he took an oath that if he'll eat the second loaf, that it won't be allowed. And when he eats the second loaf, he says, "I know I'm eating the second loaf. That this will be prohibited if I eat the first loaf." So, but in both cases, he forgets he forgets when he does the actual conditional one. So then it's pater because in both cases the oath never really takes effect. But let's say he says Zubas Shiglas Atzma Ochol Zubas Adonato Shiglas Chaverta, Vizubas Adonato Shiglas Chaverta Pater. Let's say Zubas Shiglas Atzma Vizadon Chaverta, Vizoba Shiglas Atzma Vizadon Chaverta Chayev. But let's say he remembers both of them. When he eats the conditional one, he remembers that now I can't eat the other one. And then when he eats the other one, he forgets. So then that's a carbon for both of them because that's the shogeg on both of them. It's the same case, it's just like with another factor involved. But let's say shteim b'shogeg, let's say both of them he completely forgot, and then pater. Shteim b'mezid, let's say he knows the whole time that both of them are prohibited. Ashniya mechayev, well then for the second one he eats, he's going to be liable for lashes, but Arishona, but what about the first one? Well, that's the pukta de Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish. That's a dispute. If you say Asra Safik, it's considered Asra. And Amarav Mari Afanan Nami Tanina. And so Mari says, we also learned this in our Mishnah in Nidarim. He says, let's connect this to the tractate Nidarim, because we have what are Nidre Shigagos, what are the Nidarim, what are the Nidre Shigagos that the Chachamim said is not liable for. Ketzud, what's the case where you say you're not liable? Konim imachalta, you say I take a vow, I won't be able to do this if I eat today, v'im shasisi, or if I drink, v'nizkar sha'achol v'shasa, and he remembered that he ate and then he drank, or he says she'eni ochel or she'eni shosa, and so meaning to say, he takes a note that this will be prohibited, and then he remembered that he already ate or drank. He says, this will be prohibited if I eat or drink today, and then he remembered that I ate and drank, meaning at the moment he made the vow, he didn't remember. Or if he says, she'eni ochel or she'eni shosa, or if he says, I will not eat or I'll not drink today, and shachach v'achal v'shata, and then he went ahead and he ate and he forgot that he had eaten and drank, mutter. In those cases, it's allowed because at the moment that he took the oath, he had forgotten that he had been in violation of the condition. Vitani Allah, kashem shenidresh shkagos v'taran kach shvuos shkagos v'taran. And we learned about that in the Brisa that just like this applies to vows, it also applies to oaths. So this is the Rabba's. This teaching is explicit from a Mishnah in Nidarim. This teaching of Rava is basically just an elaboration of the Mishnah in Nidarim. Almost makes us wonder why he needed to say it in the first place, because it's so obviously the case, and we have a brisa. So now the Gemara says there are two brothers who got into a conversation here. Eifa Tani Shevuos Bei Rabba. Eifa was studying the Hilchos Shevuos in the academy of Rabba. Hagabai Avimi Achua. So his brother Avimi ran into him when Eifa was coming out of the yeshiva. Amrway, so he says to him, so Avimi says to his brother, he spent the whole semester studying Shevuos. Let me ask you some kashas. Shevuos shelo achalti, mahu. Let's say he takes an oath twice, an oath that I did not eat, an oath that I did not eat, but he did eat. So how many times is he liable? So Eifa says, he's liable once, because we've already said you can't you can't take an oath on an oath. So he says, Amrway, so Avimi says to his brother, Ishtabashta, no, you're mistaken. No, this is not an oath that I'm going to do something. It's a false oath. So a false oath can apply because you said it once, you get lashes for that. And then you said it again, you get lashes for that. So that's a shvuah sheker. So that can apply in the past about something. So then he says another question. Shvuah shelo ochal teisha ve'eser mahu. So let's say he says, I'll take an oath that I'm not going to eat 9 figs. And then he takes another oath that he's not going to eat 10 figs. Is he liable twice when he then eats 10 figs? Gemara says that Eifa says, yeah, chayav al kol achas v'achas. These are 2 separate oaths. He's liable for each and every one. Hamrway, so no. Avimi says to him, ishtabashta. You made a mistake. Iteisha lo achil, eser lo achil. He says if he doesn't eat 9, he hasn't eaten 10. Meaning to say, if he's not able to eat 9 figs because of his first oath, for sure he can't eat 10 figs on account of the second oath. So the second oath doesn't take effect because he's already said I can't eat 9. So for sure he can't eat 10. So you should have realized that this oath won't take effect. He's only liable once. You have to be precise. That's what the laws of oaths are teaching us. You have to be precise. So let's say he asks him a third question. Shvuah shelo ochal eser v'teisha. He says an oath that I will not eat 10 figs, and then he says after that an oath that I will not eat 9 figs. So what's the case there? He says eino chayav el achas. Eifa says, well, there he's only liable 1. So again, Avimi says, "I'm like ishtabashta." No, again, you're making a mistake. Answer who do achil. The first oath, he can't eat 10, but Atesha mi'achil, he can eat 9. And now the second oath, he's allowed to. The second oath will take effect because he said, "I'm not going to eat 9." But first time he said, "I'm not going to eat 10," but he could eat 9. Amar Abaye says, "Zin in the mishkachas lahada eifa." Sometimes we'll see that what Eifa said is correct, meaning to say that if you take an oath against eating 10, and then you take an oath against eating 9, that the 9 will not take effect. Why? Let's say a person takes an oath that he's not going to eat figs and grapes. On one day. And then, but meaning to say figs by themselves are permitted. And then he says an oath that I'm not going to eat just the figs. And then he ate the figs accidentally. And so therefore he's in violation of the second oath. Well, you had a question?
Eats the grapes first.
All right, let me finish the case. Don't go back. So he says an oath that I'm not going to eat grapes and figs. And then a second oath that he's not going to eat figs. And then he accidentally eats the figs. Vehifrish carbon, and he separated a sacrifice to bring. He separated a sacrifice for his carbon oliviorid. And then he ate the grapes by themselves. Meaning to say, so afterwards he did eat the figs and the grapes. So you might have thought he's going to be liable now also for the first oath. But we say he's not liable for the first oath. Why? Because at that point, Havile Anavim Chatzi Shir. Because at that point, the grapes are only half of the prohibition because he already separated the sacrifice for the eating of the figs. And so therefore, we're not going to combine the grapes with the figs that he already ate in order to be liable for one oath. And for a half of an amount, or a portion of the amount, you don't have to bring a sacrifice. And Abai says, also in this case, Achinami, what is this case where we said, I'm not going to eat 10, and then he says, I'm not going to eat 9. You go into Amar Shvua, Shalo Ochal Eser. He says, an oath, I'm not going to eat 10. The Chazar Amar Shvua Shalo Ochal Tesha. And then he says, an oath that I'm not going to eat 9. V'achal Tesha v'hifresh carbon. And he ate the 9, and then he separated the carbon. V'achkach Achal Asiris. And then he ate the 10. Havilei Asiris Chati Shir. So then the 10th one is just a portion of the Shir. A Chati Shir or Mechayiv, and he's not going to be liable to bring an offering. And so that's how Abai explained that Apo would be correct in the last one. Okay, I will stop the recording here. Take any questions.